Maiga Van and Melanie, and well met indeed. I'm Arakia Galadirthan, and welcome back to this discussion of the Rings of Power, Episode 7. I am joined again today by Arakirel Haiganel, or Jess. Someone moaned that I hadn't given her a name, so there you go. She's now High Lady Jess. I'm joined by Jess.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about Episode 7. But before we begin, just a brief little recap of things that I've said wrong so far. Two things. Number one, Orc. We were talking about orcs last time and how they're created, and about the fact that Adar calls himself an Uruk, and that means orc in black speech. And I mentioned that our word for orc comes from the Elvish, and I said Urk, but Urk is plural, Y-R-C-H, that means orcs, and Orc is the Elvish for orc, which is O-R-C-H. So that's one correction. And the other one is, I mentioned that Tar Palantir, the king of Númenor, we've seen him a few times, that his name is Tar Palantir and it's Elvish, but I incorrectly said it was Sindarin. It's not, it's Quenya. And it still means the same thing, just means king, and Palantir means far-sighted, but it's Quenya, not Sindarin, so I apologise for that. But those are the corrections. Then on to Jessica's questions from this episode.
Yes, I have a few. The first one that came up was about the stranger, and he speaks a language. We've seen him speak a language a couple of times. One when he was healing himself, another when he did the smackdown thing to get rid of the wolves, and then he did it again to the tree. And my question was, is he speaking a language of the wizards, if we're assuming that it's that, or the Maya, for if he's come from where he was above, or is it just a whole made up language?
So in the show, the stranger is speaking in Quenya, because they're going for Quenya as the sort of when someone's not speaking English, if they're not speaking black speech, then they're speaking Quenya for the show. Sindarin's thrown in a few times, but the stranger is speaking in Quenya. He is, we're assuming he's a Maiar, of course. We don't actually know what he is at the moment, but if he is a Maiar, then it would be right for him to speak Quenya, because the Maiar and the Valar do have their own language, but they opted to speak Quenya around the elves. And so he would then naturally speak that around anyone he bumps into, because at the moment he doesn't learn their language, I would suppose. But no, at the moment he's speaking Quenya.
Okay. My next question was around Galadriel's husband. So she mentions that her husband has passed, or isn't here anymore. I think she's assumed that he's dead. And he mentions Celeborn, and I was just wondering, could you tell me about Celeborn and his story? We're not going to speculate on that's going to be the end, but could you tell me about Celeborn?
So Celeborn is Galadriel's husband, and speaking strictly to the law, she and him are married. He currently lives with her. At this time in the story, really, she's kind of starting to develop Lothlorien, and she spends most of her time there. So obviously Amazon has changed the story drastically so that she can fit into it. But in the law, no, Celeborn never dies. They meet in the First Age. They do meet in the circumstances that she described, if memory serves, where he first sees her dancing. And they're married very quickly, and they just do everything together. Galadriel and Celeborn are almost never parted, and then they come to Middle-earth together, they go to Lothlorien together, and eventually become the king and queen of Lothlorien when Amroth kills himself in the ocean. The most interesting about Celeborn that everyone loves to talk about is that his first original iteration of his name was Teleporno. And of course, nowadays, that has connotations that Tolkien would not have wanted. So whether that was the reason he changed it, I don't think so. I don't think he changed it because of the meaning of porn now. But Celeborn's original name was Teleporno, and everyone loves talking about that online, so you'll see it all over the place. Memes about it left, right, and centre. And when he finally comes into the show, which he will do because he won't be dead, and we'll talk about that later, as Jess says, but when he finally comes into the show, you will see meme after meme after meme about the fact that he's called Teleporno. But that's his story. He doesn't really do anything too drastic. He's involved, obviously, in The Lord of the Rings. You'll all recall him. And from the famous meme song, Tell Me Where Is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with him. So we've all met Celeborn if you've seen the films, and of course if you've read the books. But that's him in a nutshell. He doesn't have any grand events attributed to his name, I don't think. He rather walks in the shadow of his wife. But they've been married for thousands of years by this point, and he would just be in the show. But they've opted to remove him, and we'll guess why later.
Thank you. My next question was around Pelagir. Pelagir. That's mentioned as where the humans are going to go to after their village is now destroyed. Where roughly is that, and does that have any significance later on?
So, as Muriel said, Pelargir is at the mouth of the Anduin, although it's slightly up from the mouth of the Anduin, and it holds the title of the second Númenórean colony in Middle-earth. I think Londare was first, but I could be mixing those two up. But anyway, it's one of the major settlements of the Númenóreans in Middle-earth, and it's certainly the first Númenórean colony in Gondor. So Jess will show you on a map now, but there's also a Númenórean colony at Londare, which just means New Haven. And I think that one came first off the top of my head. But Londare is not in Gondor. It's further up in a place called Enedwaith, and Jess will show it on the map. But Pelargir is down in Gondor, and it was the first Gondorian settlement. So before Gondor was Gondor, the Númenóreans colonized the area, and Pelargir was their chief settlement. It is very famous for being the chief port of Gondor. And it's known as a port city throughout its whole life. It also comes into Gondor's story quite prominently later on, but by the time of the War of the Ring, Pelargir doesn't really feature very much. I think the Corsairs sack it, and then Aragorn... Either Aragorn kills the Corsairs before they get to Pelargir, or he kills them at Pelargir. I can't quite remember. Because that's just a point from the Return of the King, obviously, but it's not a major plot point in the War of the Ring, which is the time span of Lord of the Rings. So if you just watch the films, you wouldn't know of it. But it is Numenor's chief colony, yeah, and it's at the mouth of the Anduin.
That's a good bit in the film. That's a good bit.
I mean, it doesn't happen like that in the book, but that's not for this episode.
Yeah, in the film, it's fun though. My next question was about the Balrogs. So we get a little what do you call it? Cameo of the Balrog in this episode.
Little teaser.
My question was, what are the Balrogs? Are they created? Are they a demon? Just tell me about the Balrogs, please.
So the Balrogs are, you might be surprised to learn, of the same order of being as Gandalf and Saruman and Sauron. So Balrogs are just Maiar, and they took the form of these great, hideous, flaming monstrosities, and they were some of the first Maiar to side with Morgoth way back in the First Age.
So they used to be good.
Or
neutral.
They used to be neutral. Maiar can shapeshift, or they could in the beginning. And so the Balrogs didn't always look like they did now, but basically they were the chief soldiers in Morgoth's army, and indeed a Balrog called Gothmog, not to be confused with the orc in the Lord of the Rings films, but a Balrog called Gothmog in the First Age was Morgoth's chief, battlefield lieutenant, or lieutenant, sorry, and he commanded all of the Balrogs, but he was killed by Ecthelion in a very, very interesting way. He was headbutted into a fountain. But the Balrogs have always just been Morgoth's major soldiers. So if the proverbial has hit the fan, then send in the Balrogs. They'll do the damage. But yeah, they're the same order of Sauron and Gandalf and Saruman and Radagast and all the wizards. But the Balrogs are generally considered of a lesser type. So if you obviously you've got the Valar, then you've got the Maiar. But then even amongst the Maiar, there's tiers of power. Certain ones are stronger than others, and the Balrogs are generally considered lesser Maiar. But yeah, they're part of that weird godlike race of beings that were founded first before anything else.
So were they just then left on Middle Earth? Why is there one under the mountain?
Most of them were killed in the War of Wrath, and the Balrog that's in Moria just fled. In the same way that Sauron just fled, and all the elves fled from the fall of Beleriand, the Balrog ran away as well, and
just been asleep.
Somehow found his way to the bottom of Khazad-dûm. Tolkien never explains how the Balrog gets there. Given that Khazad-dûm's already been established, the Balrog somehow manages to sneak underneath the mountain. It's just never explained.
Could have gone through a volcano, you don't know. Lava tunnels.
Yeah, could have. Who knows? He might have dug his way there from Beleriand. We don't know. But yeah, he's just running away. He knows that if he stays, he will be killed, because the War of Wrath was a war between gods, not just elves and men. And he knew that he was bested, he was defeated, so he was one of the Balrogs that fled, and that's why he then finds himself in Moria.
So, in the lore side of how he wakes up, that Balrog wakes up underneath Khazad-dûm.
Khazad-dûm.
I'm not going to say that. Are they just always angry, or is he just miffed because he's been woken up and so he's going to destroy something, or is he just greedy? Like, why does he suddenly then want to kill everything?
Well, I mean, now you're getting into a question of philosophy, aren't you? I suppose, if one were to have to make it up, as is what we'd have to do, he's a servant of evil, and so he's naturally inclined, one would assume, then to fight against anything that disturbs him. Whereas a servant of good might try and talk their way out of it, the Balrog resorts to anger. I mean, I don't know. Tolkien, again, he's a plot point. Let's just call it what it is, a spade a spade. The Balrog is a plot point to get the dwarves out of Moria. Mm-hmm. There's no other purpose. He could have gone to any other mountain and the story wouldn't have happened the way it did. But Tolkien needed the dwarves to get out of Moria, and the Balrog suited his purpose. I'm sure if he lived longer, he would have explained it more, but he didn't, so we don't know. But the Balrog is a servant of evil, so it's not unusual for him to attack things, but he's not greedy, and he only attacks them because they disturb his slumber. But obviously he takes it to the nth degree. He doesn't just attack them, he wipes them out and sends... So only refugees escape Khazad-dûm, and they flee, obviously, to Erebor eventually. But no, we don't know. We don't know if he has anger management issues, or if he just really likes sleeping, or he hates dwarves specifically. That's never said.
Okay. And so they decided to side with Morgoth, and that's why they turn evil, so they can't ever go back to being good anymore.
Well, no, I don't know. That's a difficult question to answer. I would say, generally speaking, in Tolkien's Legendarium, nothing that turns to evil ever goes back to being good. I think it is unfortunately as black and white as a lot of people moan. If anyone has an example that I can't think of off the top of my head, please do say. But from my reading, and just from now where I'm scanning my brain frantically on camera, I can't think of a single case where someone that was evil turned back and repented. You've got things like madness and then the madness lifting. So like some people might say Turin, obviously marrying his own sister and killing a lot of people and then repenting in the end. He repents because the curse is lifted, not because he changes back to being good. So I don't know. I think in Tolkien's Legendarium, once a thing is evil, it's evil. And that probably leads into the Balrog.
Okay. Thanks. Oh, I just wanted to point out that Grey Mouse 81 also had... I should have said that at the beginning. Grey Mouse 81 also had a question on the Balrog, and I'm hoping that I've covered your question.
Yeah, we do read all the questions even if they don't get posted in the video.
Yeah, so hopefully that answers all your questions. But if not, Grey Mouse 81, then please do put it in the Discord, and we will answer it best we can. I won't, but Gally will. Thanks. My next question was around Mordor. So we see in the show that which I'm not going to speculate, they see in the show how they change from, the name changes from the Southlands to Mordor. So I'm assuming obviously then it wasn't always called Mordor in terms of the evil people didn't always refer to it as that. So how did it get its name, and what does Mordor mean?
So Mordor means black land or dark land. And it gets the name because the world is named by the elves, or the history is written by the victors, as they always say. And the names are what the races that we see Middle-earth through name everything. So Sauron almost certainly didn't call Mordor Mordor, I wouldn't have thought. He would have given it a different name, whether he even bothered naming it, I don't know. But it would have been the elves that called it the Black Land or the Dark Land, or indeed the Gondorians at a later point. But in essence, it was named by its enemies. I don't think Sauron ever... I've certainly never read of... I mean, Sauron is, as much as he's a major character, he's actually a very minor character in terms of how often you see him in the books. He has very little screen time, as it were, and we never get a point where he names it. And I'm almost certain the elves come to call it Mordor because it is a dark land, both literally and metaphorically. But yeah, it just means dark land. Dor means land, Mor means black or dark. Same that you see in Morgul, which means dark magic or dark knowledge. Minas Morgul. Yeah.
Dark Cookie also asked a question on Mordor. So again, Dark Cookie, if that has not answered your question, then please do let us know. And then my other question, or my next question, was around the significance of Durin the Fourth, why the him being the fourth is significant, basically, because they make it poignant about him being the fourth Durin in the show.
Yeah, so this is one of those where Amazon things comes in. Durin in the Amazon show is irrelevant. They've taken away the meaning of the name completely. It doesn't have any bearing whatsoever. His dad's called Durin, and he says in the show, "I'm honoured to have my dad's name," and they leave it at that. So Amazon have decided that the name doesn't mean anything. But in the lore, as we touched upon in episode 1 or 2, I think, Durin was the founder of the clan that lives in Khazad-dûm. They're called the Longbeards. There were 7 clans of the dwarves. Durin led his own one and founded Khazad-dûm. And then he was said to be reborn 7 times, and the 7th rebirth of Durin would mark the downfall of the Longbeards, or the dwarves altogether. So Durin the Fourth, we're about halfway through. But in the lore again, Durin the Fourth was the Durin who was in control when the Balrog defeated Khazad-dûm. So they're at one hand they're trying to feed you, and in the other hand they're putting medicine into you, because because they've shown us that they don't care about the name. They're not going to follow the lore tradition of the name. But then they've also made a big point to make you know that he's Durin the Fourth, so that then people will be like, oh, that's the Durin that was there when the Balrog came. But why they've bothered to do this half house, I just don't understand it. I don't understand why they needed to disregard the law in this point. Most of the time when Amazon disregards the law and changes it, it's in their eyes at least, for the betterment of the story. They're changing something difficult so that it works better for a narrative, for a TV show. That's why the shows condense thousands of years into only a few years. But with the Durin name, I can't understand how it improves or helps or aids their story in any way to do away with the very simple thing that this is the reborn Durin. They could have even made a show of it, I thought, by having him let us all meet this dwarf and call him something else. And then when his dad eventually dies, have some big song and dance of him being, oh my word, this is one of the reborn Durins. We all understand now.
Probably take too long, though, wouldn't it? Because then you'd have to explain, and
maybe.
You'd have to do like a mini flashback, or I feel like it would take like, I don't know, a quarter of the episode, I think, to explain that bit.
Yeah, true. And maybe that is enough. Maybe they just thought, for the most viewers, they won't care that there are 7 Durins. They won't care about the reincarnated Durin myth. So let's just have him be the son of another Durin and call it a day. And I suppose, that probably does. That probably is enough of a reason for them. But so that's Durin in the story, but in the show, Durin just doesn't mean anything. Okay,
well, I'm going to come back to the name thing in the speculation section from what you've just said, but I'll come back to that. My last question was around Tar Palantir. So Miriel uses a different name for him, and it took me a second to realise that I think she says my father and then says a different name.
Yeah.
And I missed it slightly, but I've got it what I thought it was written down, which was R in Ziladun written down. And I was just wondering why she used a different name for him, and why she just didn't call him Tar Palantir.
Yeah, so all of the Númenóreans were originally named in Quenya, which we've discussed before as well. And then when Númenor turned away from the elves, they changed to naming themselves in their own language. Tar Palantir is the second to last Númenórean king. And he repents and he sees the light and he changes his name back to Quenya. But his Ardenaic name is Ar Inziladun.
What's Ardenaic?
Ardenaic is the language of Númenor, their own language. It's not an inherently evil language, it's just their own language.
So what we think the map would have been written in, that?
Yeah, it would have been written
So is that his name that the people gave him, rather than going back
so that's
to Tar
just
Palantir?
his...
No.
That's his regal name, that's his name.
Right.
That he took when he became king. And then he changed his name back into Quenya.
Right.
But she's calling him by his Ardenaic name for reasons unknown to us. maybe just to throw it in there, maybe to show that she's on the side of the King's Men, which is the King's Men are the faction of Numenor that don't like the elves, and the faithful are the faction that do, and they're the two primary antagonist cultures.
Okay. Well, they were all of my questions.
Oh, Inziladun means flower of the west, by the way.
Flower.
Yeah. But
It's not very...
Palantir means far-sighted, as we've already discussed.
Okay. They were all of my questions, so we'll move on to all of the questions that we've had on the videos and across. Like Discord. Oh, no, we didn't take any from Discord, did we? Because we did Grey Mouse 81's in my question. Okay. So the first question that we have is from Don, and they have asked, was Sauron a better craftsman or smith than Feanor?
That's a very debatable one. Feanor creates the Silmarils, which are arguably the greatest created thing by a being in Middle-earth, or on Aman. But Sauron is a Maiar, so that is a question that forums would debate for centuries. Are the rings better than the Silmarils? That's the question in essence. I personally would suggest that because Sauron is of an order of beings higher than elves, he's probably a better smith than Feanor. Both of them served under Aule, who's the god of smithing. So it's debatable. Honestly, you could ask that question 10 times to 10 different fans and you'd get a different answer. I would say Sauron's probably better, but there's a lot of people out there who love Feanor. They think he's amazing. There's a whole conspiracy movement that suggests that he didn't do anything wrong. You've probably heard of it if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings. Some people actually buy into it. They're not just memeing. They genuinely think he didn't do anything wrong. And they would tell you Feanor's the best thing since sliced bread. So it's a difficult one to answer. I would say Sauron. Others might have different opinions. More research is needed.
Fair enough. And the next question is, and I do not know how to say that.
Astatier.
Say that. Okay, say that this way.
I would say Astatier.
Okay.
But it might be a harder J.
If Melkor Morgoth cannot make life, how he made werewolves, great bats, great drakes, and dragons. Oh wait, I've said that incorrectly slightly. If he can't make life, I'm assuming then how did he make werewolves, great bats, great drakes, and dragons?
The question that is on everyone's mind there, Astatier, I'm afraid, and this is exactly why everyone laments the death of Tolkien. Well, no, we lament the death for many reasons, but this is another one of those things he just never properly cleared up. And your question hits that nail on the head. Tolkien sets down in principle that nothing other than Eru Ilúvatar can create life. So other things can create beings, but only Eru can give them life, can give them like free will, the breath of life. We see this with the dwarves. Aule creates the dwarves and he makes them and they're all standing in front of him, but they don't have any life. They're like sculptures. They're like living sculptures, but with no animation to them at all. And Eru Ilúvatar tells Aule, you can't create life, only I can, so destroy these things. He goes to destroy them. Eru takes pity. They cower away from Aule, and that's how we know they've been given life. So we know as a set principle in the universe, Eru's the only one that can give life. And then that leads into the then almost paradox-like nature of this, which suggests that means that Eru also created all of the evil things. But then Tolkien then tries to retcon that a bit, and he says that all of the evil things are made in mockery of the good things. So trolls are mocks of Ents, orcs are mocks of elves, etc. But therein again lies the problem. Where did they all come from? Did Morgoth twist Ents to become trolls? Did he give them some sort of like half life, so they've not got full life, thus not breaking the golden rule that only Eru can give life? And are they sort of slaves? That's a theory that I've seen a lot of people suggest, that like orcs and all of these evil creatures, they can only do because Morgoth is kind of controlling them to do those things. So when Morgoth and Sauron aren't there, they're like mindless nothings, like automatons. But in short, we just don't know. The theories are all contradictory. And again, ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different answers. And the short answer is just Tolkien ran out of time before he really explained how these things were created. What was twisted to become a dragon? What was twisted to become a werewolf? Like, where are these things from?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Could it have been in the place where I can't remember the name of we've got a question coming up about it, where they went to in the north.
Angband.
Yep.
Autumno.
Is that where the elves went in the beginning, in the first episode?
No, they went somewhere in Forrodwaith.
Okay. Well, in a place like that, could it have been that... oh no, because that's Sauron's not.
Yeah.
I was going to say, could it have been that they take like the soul of a good thing and then put it into the creation animated thing of the bad thing, and then they've corrupted and twisted and tortured it, and then that's how the soul's then gone bad, a bit like how the orc souls go bad, and then they become the evil thing. So they're not creating life as such, they're just swapping the body.
Yeah, potentially, but then, like, is one soul worth another? Could a human soul power the body of a dragon?
No, but like
I
if
just
you
wouldn't
could,
have thought so.
yeah, but you could do the equivalent of. So
But
like
what's
if-
the equivalent of a dragon?
I don't know, the eagles.
Well, yeah, but then again, like, is one eagle's soul really worth one dragon? A dragon is like 5 eagles. I
then
mean,
it would be, wouldn't it, then?
It's a theory, but again, and in answer to the question, that's all we have: theories. They all contradict each other, I'm afraid, so we just don't know.
I like my theory.
It's a good theory.
Thanks. Next question is from Glass Yeti. My question is about the geographical placing of the village, the tower fort, and the trenches the orcs dug in the Southlands or Mordor. I'm quite confused where everything is. The lake that then floods Mount Doom especially, is the lake in the valley behind where the Black Gate would be, or is it nearer to Mount Doom?
So again, Jess will show you this one mostly because it's visual, but the village and everything that we see is in a small mountain arm south of Mount Doom. And I saw a map on Reddit, actually, that suggested that the show has created a whole new pass into Mordor through the Efelduath, which is the Mountains of Shadow on the left-hand side, and the ones on the left. Yeah, they're called the Efelduath.
Would they not be up here?
No, they're south,
How do you know that?
because they've shown you on the map.
Oh, right, okay.
Anyway, Jess will show you on the map that if you just get a still of the map, you can see exactly where the village is. But it's south of Cirith Ungol, south of Minas Morgul, down, and there's a little arm of... the plain of Gorgoroth is surrounded by 2 mountain arms that come down, and then Nirn is south of that. And I think the village is just north of that southern mountain arm, where they meet the Efelduath. But it's a visual question. Jess will show you on a map where the village is.
So the next question is from Herder. In the beginning of the episode, Isildur says something along the lines of, "It's not the real Numenor, if such thing ever even existed." What did he mean by that? Is Numenor supposed to be some sort of Numenor 2.0? What was the 1.0 then? And then I don't remember reading anything of that sort.
So Isildur is just reflecting on the fact that Numenor has changed and we're in the dark timeline for Numenor. We're in the latter stages of their line. It's showing again that Isildur and Elendil are part of the faithful, people that don't like the path Numenor's going on. And he's just saying this isn't the real Numenor, because it's not. It's the warped and twisted Numenor that it becomes when they become envious of the elves and they turn away from the elves. And that's all he's referencing there. It's just a show giving a nod that there was a different Numenor in the past that didn't hate elves and didn't turn away from them and that kind of thing.
This one is from Mitchell Russo. I had a few extra questions if you can help me. So, first one is, Gala went to Angband.
I think that's meant to be Galadriel. Because I read this comment online as well and I wondered what he meant by Gala. Well, I assume it's Galadriel.
Okay, we're going to assume that's Galadriel. Went to Angband.
Yeah.
Is that the place in Middle-earth, or was it destroyed by Beleriand?
So I don't know if she did go to Angband. I think because it said she was in Forrodwaith, which is where Angband would be. But Angband is the original fortress of evil. It was Morgoth's home, and it was a giant fortress built underneath 3 mountains called the Thangorodrim. But that's all by the by. But it was destroyed in the War of Wrath. Yeah, it's been destroyed. It's not there anymore. It's sunk under the sea. So I don't think she went there. I think she just went to a place in Forrodwaith. I don't think it was meant to be Angband.
The next question that Mitchell Russo has is, what was Sauron's timeline after losing to the Valar and revealing himself back in Middle-earth?
500 years. So he hid for 500 years, and then he came back as Anatar, spoiler alert, in the 500th year. And then 500 years later, he began the process of building of the rings. So the construction of Barad-dûr began in the 1000th year of the Second Age. So the storyline at the moment where Mordor's just gone evil, that should be happening thousands of years before the rest of the show's storyline. So again, it's all about that condensed story. But yeah, Sauron hid for 500 years. We don't know what he did in that time. And when he came back, he didn't come back in a flourish. He came back and sent out feelers about how the world was doing and what could he do and where could he go. And in that time, he then founds Mordor, builds Barad-dûr, or starts building it. And then he comes back to the elves to make the rings. And the rings are made in 1200 or 1500. I think it's 1500. I can't quite remember. But yeah, so he's hidden for 500 years.
There is a more in-depth video on Galu's channel on Sauron, and I will ask Galu to link that below in the description if you wanted to find out more about Sauron's actual timeline of his life.
Yeah.
Wait, there's one more.
There's one more.
And then Mitchell Russo also asks, is Elrond and Durin knowing each other in the lore or just all pure Amazon?
Well, that's one of those vague things where you can't really hold it against them. Elrond might well have known Durin. The elves and the dwarves at this time traded prolifically, and the dwarves and the elves worked together very closely in Eregion. So the chance of Elrond knowing him is probably very high. We're never told categorically in the text that they've ever met each other, but there's no reason to suggest they wouldn't meet each other. So that's not egregious to my mind. I don't think anyone cares that Elrond and Durin have this friendship because they very well could have done. We just don't know.
It's the best bit.
It's the best bit.
Best bit. This one is rather long. So we had quite a few questions around how the magic... No?
Yeah.
How the magic in Middle-earth works, and how it's different from elves and other magic and all the other beings that are magical. I will put up the people that have asked those questions, just because we've had a few and we did read them and go through them and look at how we could answer it. But so we're just going to group that all together, and we did touch on it slightly in one of the other episodes. But yeah, just... do we know how the magic in Middle-earth works, or how the differences between elves and Maiar magic?
No, so that's, again, another thing that a lot of people bemoan about Tolkien is he never explains how magic works. It's never very overt. It's always very shrouded in mystery. For example, Finrod Felagund, who you've all spoken of many times now, Galadriel's dead brother, the whole reason for her quest, he fights against Sauron in the First Age, but they don't fight in sword to sword. They fight in a clash of songs. So read into that how you will. And Finrod almost overpowers Sauron with the strength of his song, but Sauron beats him and entombs him or imprisons him, and then he dies. So we have loads of things like that. Like that, how many questions are spurned from that? They fight in song, sorry. What on earth does that mean? Are they literally singing at each other? But obviously there's a magic behind this. You've got an elf and Sauron fighting off in a duel. But again, everyone has a different understanding of what it actually means. And magic is exactly the same. Sometimes we do see just outright spells, but they're very, very few and far between. And magic is just a really unknown quantity in Middle-earth. And often it's through the reason I mentioned the song thing is because magic is very often attributed to like strength of words and coercive words and just the power of speech over an actual thing, like Harry Potter, which we related to a lot, where it is just, I cast this spell, this thing happens. That doesn't happen in Tolkien, and he just never elaborates on it, really. Magic is just another completely unknown quantity. So just because Galadriel is powerful and is magical, it doesn't mean that she's going to whisper some word that's going to turn her and Theo invisible or anything like that. The powers just don't manifest in that way. And even the greatest magical thing that she does, which everyone always likes to use as an argument for how magical she is that at the end of the Third Age, she destroys the fortress of Dol Guldur, which appeared in the Hobbit films. So if you've only seen the films, you have seen Dol Guldur. And the council attack it, and the Nazgul fight them away, and we meet Sauron briefly in the Hobbit film. Well, that fortress comes to life a little bit more after that event, and then Galadriel eventually destroys it herself, again, through the power of her words. And all Tolkien writes is that she threw down the walls of Dol Guldur. And so again, you're left thinking, like, did she command an army then that sieged it down? Did she, like, sing at the walls and they destroyed themselves? Like, how did she destroy this fortress? We just don't know. And that is indicative of all magic in Middle-earth. We just don't know how it works, what powers people actually have, how far they go. We just don't know. But mostly, the one thing that we do know is that it's all based on the strength of words.
I mean, I would theorise about that, but I won't. The next question is from the Humanity. I forgot what the show called Adar as one of the first elves turning into Uruks. Moiveren or something similar. Does this have basis in the lore? Were the first Uruks elves who turned to Morgoth willingly and subsequently then underwent changes, or were they captured and then tortured and twisted into becoming what they are now? We did touch on Uruks in the last episode, but I think that's one that this is on, and I'm assuming that the Humanity is asking, like, was it a willing change or was it something that they went against and then that's how they became what they are, and then they just kind of accepted it and then were just evil?
I know. So if the orc creation myth that we follow is that they are twisted elves, then they were taken by Morgoth shortly after they awoke, before the Valar came and saved them. So there's a long period of time where the elves awoke. They just mingled around where they awoke, and no one knew where they were, and Morgoth was the first to find them. He found them and he started basically kidnapping them and turning them into orcs. They did not go willingly, they didn't side willingly. And they were tortured, twisted, and whatever, and they became orcs. And then the Valar learnt about that, and then they sent Arome over to come and save them, and that's why he leads them away. Is a very, 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 very paraphrased of the events, but yeah, they didn't go willingly.
That could be then why I can't remember which one, when Adar speaks to Arondir, I was about to call him Adolin again, Arondir, he mentions about when he asks where Arondir's from, and he mentions, I remember that. That could be because he was captured right at the beginning and he remembers being like mingling about and then being taken, but he never kind of embedded himself in that like area. I don't know.
Maybe.
Just a theory.
I'd seen somewhere on the internet that Arondir is actually supposed to be a Sylvan elf, apparently. And the Sylvan elves live in Middle-earth. They never made it to Beleriand. So even though he takes Gil-galad as his high king, he is of a sort of considered lesser race of elves. We've touched upon that before as well, with the tiers and the hierarchies of elves depending on if they made it to Valinor or not. And Arondir is of the race that never made it even to the shores of Beleriand, so he would be like a lesser elf. But distinctly, if he's a Sylvan elf, then he's not an Avari, whereas we thought that he might be, but he isn't.
The next question is from The Hunter. My question is, did Tolkien get into specifics about how Sauron clouded the skies in Mordor for the orcs to be able to wander without having to worry about the sun? Since we do know that the sword or key wasn't canon.
Yeah, so this is actually linked into the magic question again. Sauron uses his magics to darken the sky. And that's really all there is to it. Before he attacks Minas Tirith in the Third Age, he sends a great cloud ahead of his army so that it blocks out the sun. And again, it's just through the power of Sauron. And that's it. That's all we know. Because, of course, one volcano would not darken the entire skies. It would eventually stop seeping ash into the air. And even then, the ash wouldn't cover everything, would it? It would blow on the wind. So it's Sauron's power. It's his magic that darkens the sky. But the show has gone for this ash darkening the sky thing for their own narrative.
So the next question is from The Monkey with No Soul. Now, there are 3 parts to this. I will try and paraphrase. So the first one is around Uruks. So I was hoping that you could clear up a distinction between Uruk being black speech for orc, with specific Uruks we see in the Third Age, primarily Urukai and black Uruks.
Yeah, so it's a technicality that Adar calls himself Uruk, as we've discussed. It means orc in black speech. And yes, in The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien then uses Uruk-hai, or black Uruks, or one of the two, to identify a distinct subcategory of orc that are improved over normal orcs. So yes, that's why so many people are up in arms about this, because Uruk-hai, as the race of orcs that we see later on, are a distinct subbreed of orc that are blended with men and they're more powerful. But Uruk just means orc. So Amazon is riding the line of a technicality to allow Adar to call himself that. But at the moment, the orcs that we are seeing are not the future Uruk-hai that we come to learn about later on in thousands of years' time. So these are just lesser orcs at the moment. Amazon is not suggesting they are Uruk-hai. He's just using the technicality of black speech. Uruk meaning orc.
The next part is around Adar. So, paraphrasing again, they've mentioned around the fact that Adar, it's Adar and Arondir's nature are mirrored in each other in episode 6, and just wondering, does this hint at Adar's original elven origin?
So, in essence, he's asking here, if Adar can speak Quenya, does that mean he's not one of the Avari, and thereby he went on the great journey, and he either made it to Beleriand and then was twisted, or he made it to Valinor and then was twisted? But to be honest, I think you're giving the show writers just way too much thought. The show is not going to make any clear distinction between Noldor, Vanyar, Teleri, Avari. It's not going to do anything about that. So, for the purposes of the show, Adar is an elf. And he was one of the first elves that was twisted to Morgoth. Then, if you look at that from a lore perspective, then he must be an Avari, or he doesn't have to be an Avari. They're the ones that just didn't go. When they all awoke, they were all just elves. They were just one sect, and they'd broken into the 3 families. So he's an original elf, is all we know. Whether or not he went on the journey or not makes no odds for Amazon storytelling, and indeed for our own purposes, doesn't really matter. All we need to know is he's one of the first twisted orcs.
The last bit is actually speculation.
Do we think that Adar's story is going to end with the creation of the Black Uruks? And no, again, you're giving Amazon way too much credit, personally. No, Adar's story is not going to end with the Black Uruks. To be honest, if Adar really isn't Sauron, which is looking very likely, I think he's going to die, and I think Sauron's going to kill him. And I think that's going to be the end of his story. Mm. But no, I don't think anything Black Uruk is going to come from it. To be honest, I think that's too much credit for Amazon.
So we're now moving into the speculation section. So I guess we'll start with your speculation questions, as that's probably better, because I have 4 things I would like to speculate on. So the first speculation question or suggestion that we had was from Chris MCA7X. I just managed to catch up with the show this evening, and my question is, could the watchtower that is pretty much destroyed at this point in the series eventually become Cirith Ungol?
Mm-hmm. Originally, I thought that it probably would be, but then this new map that I mentioned a little earlier in this episode that I've seen, suggesting there's another pass through the mountains, suggests that we're far south of Cirith Ungol. So, no. In short, unfortunately, we're not in the right place for it to be Cirith Ungol, so it just won't be. But then I haven't seen that map anywhere else, so I'd need to look at Amazon's official map to answer that question. But I thought it was going to be the remnants of Cirith Ungol, and then it was going to be turned into the Tower of Cirith Ungol, but it seems like that's not the way they're going for it.
What is the Tower of Cirith Ungol?
It's the tower where Frodo is taken after he's stabbed by Shelob, and then the orcs find him and they take him to the tower, and then Sam
the bit where they talk about a menu. That bit.
No. That's the Uruk-hai from Isengard.
What tower then? Where he's
he's stabbed by Shelob, and Sam finds him and thinks he's dead.
Yeah.
And then the orcs come over the hill and capture him, and they take him back to the tower. And then he wakes up, he can't find the ring, he's terrified, and then the orcs are arguing over his shiny shirt.
Oh, yeah.
And then they start fighting each other, and Sam makes it through the confusion and saves him, and that's Cirith Ungol.
And then Sam gives him back the ring.
And then they go into Mordor from there.
Next question is from Jason Morgan, and they ask, lore-wise, which would make more sense, that he, as in Sauron, is in Eregion whispering to Celebrimbor, or in Númenor influencing Ar-Pharazôn, or pouncing about somewhere else? So
lore accurately, he'd be pouncing around somewhere else at the moment, and he's on his way to Eregion to start influencing them. He has nothing to do with Númenor until Númenor gets really powerful at the end of its story. But again, because they've constricted the timeline into one story, he could be anywhere for their show. So, unfortunately, because of the timeline thing, he is at the moment both preparing himself to attack Numenor, and he's also preparing himself to create the rings, whereas the latter should have come thousands of years before the former.
But I guess in the show, it could have been that Sauron has already spoken to Ar-Pharazôn, telling him that if he does X, Y, Z, he could become king.
Well, that would be too much of a break. In the show at the moment, Sauron should be in Eregion with the rings. He should be whispering to Celebrimbor. Okay. And at the moment, he just shouldn't have anything to do with Numenor, which is one of the main reasons why I think Halbrand being Sauron is not true. But we'll see.
So we'll move now into my speculation points and yours, if you have any.
I don't.
You don't. So I had this thought, and so did Kyle Landis, has also suggested it. Actually, no. Kyle Landis also has another question around...
Oh, yeah.
So I'll go into speculation, but Kyle Landis also says, does not take Sauron 100 plus years to build Barad-dûr, so every human and half that we meet will just be dead by the end, even if they have a normal, peaceful life.
This is... sorry to break it to you, Kyle, but the story that we're seeing at the moment happens thousands of years before the story of the War of the Rings. So almost everyone you meet is going to be dead by the time the normal Lord of the Rings takes over. And Barad-dûr specifically takes 600 years to build. But I don't think we're going to see... Again, they're going to compress that. They're going to shorten that. They're not going to make that happen. So the show is condensing thousands of years into the lifespan of the characters on screen. And that's how they're solving their problem.
And then the other speculation point that Kyle has raised is that the stranger could be Radagast. Now, I've wrote this down too, and my thought on that was that he could be Radagast because he's got an affiliation with nature, it seems. There's a very similar scene to when he's healing the tree in The Hobbit, when he heals the hedgehog, and I realised that's not the law, but they got it from somewhere. But the only other thing that kind of poo-poos my theory or speculation and suggests that it could still be Gandalf is that don't the Ents say something that Gandalf has an affiliation with trees or has some sort of care in trees or something like that?
No, so Radagast, all of the wizards were sent to Middle-earth collectively to help Middle-earth against Sauron. So the Valar didn't want to get involved, but equally they didn't want to leave them to nothing. So they thought, right, we'll send some emissaries who can help. Mm-hmm. And each Valar sent, well, not each, because only 5 went, but the 5 wizards were chosen by 5 powerful members of the Valar. So Radagast was sent to Middle-earth by Yavanna, who's the Valar of nature. She created the Ents, she created nature. She is Gaia of the universe. Mm-hmm. And so he's the one who would be mostly in tune with nature, and that's why he talks to animals, and he gives up his mission almost immediately and basically spends his whole time just trying to save any creature he comes across. Mm-hmm. Rather than thinking of the big picture, he focuses very much on, oh, this tree's damaged, I'll heal it, and oh, that creature's been killed, I'll try and revive it, or whatever. And the others are sent by equally important persons, and Gandalf, I believe, is sent by Manwë, who's the king of the Valar. So Gandalf has the biggest task, and Saruman is sent by Aule. So Saruman and Sauron are both students of Aule, the smith one that I mentioned before. I'm sure Gandalf's sent by Manwë, but I could be wrong. But anyway, Gandalf is seen as the one that's going to do the job. And the others all have sort of underlying missions. Yavanna asks Radagast to look after the world, as it were. So any affinity to nature is all linked with Radagast.
So okay, so that then it could be then that the wizard would more likely be Radagast than Gandalf if we were going by lore.
Yeah.
Stuff.
I think, to be honest, now that I'm coming to the theory that the stranger isn't Sauron, I think the show is doing everything it can to make you think that he is all 5 wizards at once. And then so that you can't really know, because obviously he looks an awful lot like Gandalf, but he's dressed in brown and he likes nature, and he's come earlier, which the Blue Wizards did, so he could be them as well. And so I think they're just trying to make you think he's obviously a wizard, but we're just not going to tell you which one yet.
It would be good if it was Sauron, I think, because
I think it'd be best if he was Sauron,
because
personally.
then
because I saw as well
Saruman.
Oh, Saruman.
Saruman. Because,
no, I disagree.
Oh, okay. I think it'd be good if it was Saruman, because then we actually see more of Saruman being good. Because we only see him a little bit in The Hobbit, but he was so old in that. Anyway.
Well, even by The Hobbit, he's already starting to turn.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It'd be good to see him as good, because he is a good.
Yeah, he starts out
wizard.
good. Yeah. He doesn't turn evil. He just falls. He thinks he can save the world by replacing Sauron rather than removing Sauron's plan altogether.
And also, I think my theory about them, my speculation of him being a wizard, because I think the cult people, I've forgotten the what is it? Is it the Dweller? No, I can't remember all their names.
The cult people.
The cult people, the white people. They, I think, rather than them being someone that they're going to help the stranger, it's probably hinting more that they are bad people and they're going to hurt the stranger because of what they did to the hobbits. No.
Well, I was going to say something sarcastic, but then everyone's going to say I'm mean to you again. But you think the people that burn all the hobbits are bad people?
I do, yeah.
What a surprise!
No, but I feel like in the first one, we don't have in the episode before the fifth episode.
2 episodes ago.
2 episodes ago. It wasn't 100% set that they were going to be bad. They were just mysterious and
But I feel like this episode
bad.
has cemented.
Yeah, that's what
I'm
saying.
These people
it
are evil.
supports the theory that he's going to that the stranger's going to be good and that they're bad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a theory. That's what I'm saying.
Right,
I think this show has told you categorically.
Yeah, but we don't know for a fact that he's a wizard, do we?
No, we don't know that he's a wizard, but we know that they are evil.
Yeah.
And Nori obviously knew that as well, and then got everyone killed, and she should have just stayed quiet. But that's by the by. But I mean, I still would like the stranger to be Sauron. I think that works. And I did see someone online had suggested. It was either in our comment section or it was somewhere else, can't recall. But someone had suggested that Adar's story might be true, and he did kill Sauron, i.e. his physical form, and then the meteor coming back was Sauron rebirthing, like taking a new form. Because obviously you can't kill Sauron, not obviously, but maybe you do or don't know. You can't kill Sauron, he's a Maya, his spirit will endure forever. And even at the end of The Lord of the Rings, when the ring is destroyed, he isn't killed, he's banished to the void. So he's just unkillable, the same as Morgoth. So they have to go to a special prison, basically. And so I think that supports that theory. Adar may actually have killed him, not realise that he can't kill him properly. And then the meteor is him coming back, which would just be so brilliant.
That
but
would be a very
I
good...
don't think that's going to be the
That
case.
would be good.
I think we either haven't met Sauron or, unfortunately, Halbrand probably is going to be him. I don't want Halbrand to be him, and I don't think he is, but I just feel like maybe the show thinks it's cleverest if Halbrand is him.
Is there weight in the lore that they are a bit dazed when the Mara come to Middle-earth, or is that again
No,
show?
no. That's just the show. Yeah, the fact that he's forgotten everything is just to help. The fact that he's forgotten everything is a plot point so that they don't have to tell you who he is. So that we can then all wonder who he is.
But I mean, it's a good plot point. I mean, it's making everyone chat about it. So,
Well, yeah, that's what they wanted, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. My next speculation was around Celeborn. So we know that Celeborn is not going to... Well, we don't know. We're highly assuming that Celeborn's not going to be dead and he's going to come back in the show.
Yeah.
My question is, how do you think they will do that? Do you think he's going to be just wandering about and they find him? Or he's been captured? Or...
So I think Celeborn is just going to come back and it's going to be like, oh, he never was dead. And Galadriel's going to be like, where have you been all this time? And he's either going to have been captured by Sauron or just something like that. But I have seen, and I know what you're angling at, specifically I think Nerd of the Rings' theory, if memory serves, that instead they're going to have Celeborn come back like Glorfindel. So Celeborn was killed, his soul went to the Hall of Mandos, where all elven souls go when they die. They're then judged there, and if they are deemed to be worthy, they are, almost all of them are then re-embodied, and they live in Valinor, but they never come back. So elves don't really die. It's another loophole in the story. But some elves, if they're deemed super worthy, are allowed to come back to Middle-earth. And I think actually Glorfindel might be the only one that ever does come back. But anyway, there's an elf called Glorfindel. If you've read the books, you know who he is. If you haven't, you haven't. I won't go into his story, but he was a powerful elf. He did good deeds, and he was allowed to come back, and he did. And so he's in the Lord of the Rings after having been killed by a Balrog thousands of years before that. And so I think it was Nerd of the Rings has suggested that Celeborn is going to come back like Glorfindel. They're going to merge the two stories together. But I just think I think that's giving Amazon too much credit and also probably too much leeway with the story. I don't know that Glorfindel's story is in the appendices. And although, of course, I don't know if he describes how he comes back in the actual body of the book, because you meet Glorfindel in the Fellowship of the Ring.
In the book or the film?
In the book.
In the book. He's not in the
film.
film.
In the film, Arwen replaces him completely. So everything Glorfindel does, Arwen does.
When we first started going out, and we discovered that we both liked Lord of the Rings, mine was much, much less than Gallows. I remember you saying about a character called Glorfindel and how he's not in it, and you were really disappointed because you used to have a little Warhammer person.
Yeah,
of him.
Of him on his horse.
Yeah.
Glorfindel's always been one of my more favourite elves in the story. So, but I don't think that's going to be what happens. I think Celeborn is probably going to have been captured, and Galadriel's going to save him. But yeah, he can't be dead because then Amazon is retconning the film, and they simply can't do that. So Celeborn is going to come back. It's just how and when we just don't know.
It'd be nice though. My next one was around Durin's secret name. Now I know that from what you were saying, how Durin is meant to be the special name, but they mentioned in this episode around around dwarfs having special names, secret names.
Yeah.
I had two parts to this. One is the secret name thing, a thing in the lore, and then my second part is that I thought maybe they are going to do the secret name as the nod to that being the indication that he's special rather than Durin. So Durin is the normal name, and then the secret name will signify that he's going to be special in his reign rather than Durin. So I have two parts. Yeah.
So the name thing is true. The Dwarven language is heavily guarded. They don't let anyone know it, and that includes their own name. So they give everyone their fake names, as it were. But then obviously they're not fake names because they are their names. But the Dwarven language is called Huzdul, and
they speak it in this episode, don't they?
They did speak it a little bit, actually. Very little Huzdul is known. And again, it's a bit of a plot point, really. Tolkien, I think, did that so he didn't have to invent a fourth language. So we don't really know any Huzdul. There's hardly any attested, and the dwarves are said to never speak it. They don't even write in it. It's a totally secret language that they use for themselves. And so in that language, they obviously have different names. So that part is true. But as I mentioned earlier about how they're doing away with the significance of Durin, I don't think even if we learn Durin's fake name, it's not going to mean anything. And also, Tolkien never gives us any dwarf's Huzdul name. So even if they say the name, no one's going to be like, oh yeah, that's his Huzdul name, because no one knows it. So they have their own language. It's incredibly secretive. They don't even use it. Even the doors of Durin that we see in the Fellowship of the Ring, the runes above the door are written in Elvish, not in the Dwarven language. That's how secretive they are with their own language. They don't even write on their own doors in their own language.
And the is it a dwarf that was writing in the film when Gandalf picks up the book and reads it? Gandalf picks up the book and reads it, and then Pippin makes the helmet fall off. But that was written in, obviously Gandalf would probably be able to read it if it was written in that language, but that was written not in
so that's Dwarven runes ascribed in the normal tongue, I think, so English in essence.
Okay, well that's fine. I mean, I think it would be fun that if they did have that, because it would then again would be a nod to the lore rather than that, but it would just be in a different way, so they don't have to explain it, and that could be what the secret name is. But I just thought it would be, when you were saying about how Durin they're doing away with it, and then they mentioned about the secret name in this episode, I thought it might be a nice way to incorporate that, but that was all. My last speculation point was around Halbrand. Obviously he's injured in this episode quite severely, and they're having to now go and get some elvish medicine to fix him up. No, everyone has mentioned Anatar. Obviously, I only know Anatar from the name Anatar from speaking to you, because it hasn't been mentioned in the film, in the show yet, has it?
No.
So I had a theory on this, or a couple of theories potentially on this. My one was potentially that he's going to go to Linden and then they're going to introduce Anatar then, as Sauron, and then that's how, like, in the next episode, and then we're going to be like, ooh, another person, they're going to say it, and then all the people who know more about Lord of the Rings will then know that is Sauron, and then I won't. But also I've seen it coming up on that one is that's how we're going to meet Sauron. That's one part of my speculation. My other part of the speculation around Halbrand is that I've seen a few people suggest that because he was found on the road and not in the village with this wound, is that he has self-inflicted that wound, and that he is using that as a reason to then get to Linden, to then be able to then be introduced to the elves, and then...
Yeah, so you think that if he's Sauron, he's wounded himself so he can get there, and if he's not Sauron, they're using him as a way to introduce Anatar.
Yeah, and I don't think personally that Halbrand is going to be Sauron. I'd be disappointed if he was
King of the Dead.
Yeah. But having read that about or heard other people speak about, well, I think it was written actually in a comment somewhere around that being a reason for him supporting being Sauron, I thought that was a really interesting theory. It's not my theory, but I thought that was like I thought it was good.
Yeah, I mean, if he is Sauron, that does lend itself some meaning, doesn't it? Because if he is Sauron, he's not going to let the orcs wound him, is he? But then equally, he doesn't care about orcs. He'd kill thousands of them if it helps him achieve his goal, because at this point, Sauron's fully gone. So, I worry with that theory that that whoever's thought it up has given Amazon too much credit. I'll be very disappointed if Halbrand is Sauron, because there's a lot of holes in that story from a lore point of view. But I wouldn't be surprised if he is now. But I'm with you that Halbrand's going to go back to Linden, and then we're going to meet Anatar in the last episode, and then that's it. And then they're going to leave it on a big cliffhanger, so that all of us who know who Sauron is will then spend the gap between season 1 and 2 thinking, right, so we've met Sauron. And then the people that don't want to ruin it for themselves will speculate for the next year and a half about who is Anatar, what's that going to mean. Yeah. All right, so that's everything for this episode. So only one episode left to talk about, but then Jess has convinced me that we should then do a final episode where we actually break tradition with this series and talk about whether or not we actually liked it. We had a request for someone for us to do a rating of out of 10. So we will do that. Oof, I'm not sure I'd be able to give it a rating out of 10, but I'll talk about my thoughts about it, and Jess will talk about her thoughts.
Not the whole series, like each episode. And then you could do an average, and then it's just a mathematical equation.
Well, no, but I can't. I'm not going to rank. Anyway, we'll talk. Okay. There's 2 more episodes left for our purposes for YouTube. We'll talk about the last episode next week, and then sometime after that, probably a week or so after, we will then do a video about what we thought about the whole show. So that's all we really have left. But for today, that's everything. So if you do have any questions, please, again, either join the Discord and post them in the Rings of Power thread, which is at the top left on the Discord threads. Or you can just post it on YouTube. Not a problem at all. And we will get to them. Sometimes, as I say, we will reply to your comment as a comment if we think it's been replied to in a video already, which has happened a couple of times this week. And I'm sure it will happen more as we go forward. So please don't be disheartened if you don't make it to the video. But for now, that's everything. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. And until we speak again, dear friends, Navar Naden Perimad Melunin, and farewell.